I'm writing this because I don't really know where else to put it. I've told pieces of this story to friends, but everyone hears what they want to hear. Some people decide I'm a villain right away. Others try too hard to excuse me. I'm not looking for either. I just want to tell it the way it felt while I was inside it, before everything blew up. I'm Emily. I'm 34, live outside Chicago, and until recently I was married to the same man for 11 years. Michael and I met when we were both broke and ambitious, and convinced that love was mostly about choosing the right person, and then sticking with that choice. For a long time, that worked. Nothing dramatic broke us at first. There was no cheating on his side, no screaming matches, no police, no therapists with notepads. That's part of what made it so confusing. From the outside, we were fine, stable, predictable, safe. From the inside, I felt like I was slowly disappearing. Michael's a good man. I want that clear. He's organized, calm, responsible. He plans everything. Vacations, budgets, weekends. Even our arguments had a structure to them. If I got emotional, he'd wait for me to finish, and then explain, very patiently, why my feelings didn't match the facts. One night, maybe a year before everything happened, I told him, "I feel lonely even when you're right next to me." He didn't get defensive. He never does. He just sighed and said, "Emily, we spend almost all our free time together. We talk every day. What exactly are you missing?" I didn't have a clean answer. That's another problem. When you can't explain your unhappiness in bullet points, it starts to feel illegitimate. We didn't have kids. That was a choice we kept postponing until it quietly became a decision. I told myself I was fine with that, but sometimes I wondered if we'd skipped something that would have forced us to grow instead of just settle. I started thinking about divorce in a vague, abstract way. Not, "I'm leaving tomorrow," but more like imagining a different version of my life while folding laundry. I'd picture my own apartment, my own schedule, silence that felt chosen instead of empty. When I finally said the word, divorce, out loud, it was during a calm conversation on a Sunday afternoon. No yelling, no tears yet. "I don't think I'm happy," I said. "And I don't know how to fix that here." Michael nodded slowly, like he was already rearranging the future in his head. "If that's what you want, we can talk to lawyers and do this the right way." That sentence scared me more than anger would have. The right way, to Michael, meant preparation. Documentation. Strategy. A week later, he told me he'd consulted a family lawyer to understand his options. He said it casually, over dinner, like he was talking about switching insurance providers. "I want this to be clean," he said. "Fair. No surprises." I smiled and said okay, but my stomach dropped. I suddenly felt like I was already losing something and didn't know the rules of the game. A few days later, I met Ryan Cole for the first time. Michael asked if I wanted to sit in on the initial consultation, so there would be full transparency. That should have reassured me. Instead, it made me feel like a guest in my own breakup. Ryan was older than us, early 40s maybe. He didn't smile much, but when he did, it was quick and controlled. He shook my hand, looked me in the eye, and said, "Emily, I know this isn't an easy process. My job is to make sure things stay clear and predictable." Predictable again. That word followed me everywhere. The meeting was professional. He asked about assets, timelines, goals. Michael answered most of the questions. I filled in gaps. Ryan listened closely, not just to what we said but how we said it. I noticed that, even then. Afterward, in the parking lot, Michael said, "I like him. He's thorough?" "Yeah. He seems confident." That night, I lay awake thinking about how quickly my marriage had turned into a case file. I didn't feel angry yet. I felt erased. Here's the part people judge the hardest, and I get why. Somewhere in that fog, I started thinking that if I was going to leave, I needed to feel something decisive. Something that made the choice irreversible. I didn't want to drift out of my marriage. I wanted a clean break, even if it hurt. I told myself a lot of things. That emotional distance counted as a kind of ending already. That Michael had checked out years ago. Even if he didn't know it. That I deserved to feel wanted, not just accommodated. I didn't wake up one morning planning to cross a line. It felt more like standing near it for a long time, convincing myself it wasn't really there. The next time Ryan emailed me directly, it was about paperwork. He copied Michael, kept it formal. Still, I reread the message more than I needed to. That embarrassed me. I told myself it was just nerves. At that point, nothing had happened. Not even close. But something had shifted. The idea that my life could change dramatically no longer felt theoretical. It felt like it was circling me, waiting for me to make one clear mistake or one brave decision. I didn't know yet how closely those two things can look alike. The first time Ryan crossed the line, it was subtle enough that I could pretend it hadn't happened. He emailed me late one evening, just me this time, no Michael copied. The subject line was still about documents, but at the end he added, "If you have questions you don't feel comfortable asking in front of your husband, that's normal, you can reach out." I stared at that sentence longer than I should have. It felt like permission. Or maybe like someone noticing something I'd been trying to hide even from myself. I replied something safe. Thanked him. Asked a neutral question about timelines. He answered quickly, clearly, professionally. And then added, "This process can be isolating. Make sure you're taking care of yourself." That should have been the end of it. Instead, it became a pattern. A few messages a week. Always about the divorce, technically. But the tone softened. He asked how I was holding up. I told him the truth, or at least a version of it. That I felt numb. That Michael was already emotionally somewhere else. Ryan never criticized Michael directly. He didn't have to. He just listened. One afternoon, after a particularly stiff dinner with my husband, where we discussed who would keep the couch like it was a business negotiation, Ryan suggested we meet in person to go over some options. "Just you and me?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Yes," he said. "If that's okay." I told myself it was practical. Michael trusted him. This was still within the rules. We met at a coffee shop downtown, neutral territory. Ryan arrived early. He stood when he saw me, which felt old-fashioned in a way that caught me off guard. Up close, he was less polished than in the office. No suit jacket, sleeves rolled up, faint lines around his eyes. He looked tired. Real. We talked for over an hour. About the divorce, yes, but also about life in general. He told me he'd been divorced for 5 years. "No kids. Sometimes things end even when no one does anything wrong," he said, stirring his coffee. I felt something loosen in my chest. When we stood to leave, there was a moment, just a second, where neither of us moved. He looked at me like he was deciding something. "This might be inappropriate," he said carefully, "but if you ever want to talk without legal language, I'd be open to that." I laughed, nervous. "You mean like, as people?" "Exactly." I went home that day feeling lighter and more anxious at the same time. Michael noticed my mood and asked if the meeting went okay. "It was fine," I said. "Productive." That wasn't a lie. It just wasn't the whole truth. From there, things slid instead of jumped. Texts replaced emails. Jokes appeared where there hadn't been any before. Late night conversations that started about logistics and ended somewhere personal. I told him things I hadn't told Michael in years. Like how invisible I felt, how tired I was of being reasonable all the time. Ryan never rushed me. That was part of what made it dangerous. He didn't say, "Leave him." He didn't say, "You deserve better." He just said things like, "That sounds lonely." Or, "I can see why that would hurt." The first time he touched me, it was his hand on my arm when I was talking. A grounding gesture. I didn't pull away. I also didn't lean in. I told myself that meant I was still in control. A week later, we met again, this time for a drink. I justified it easily. We were two adults talking. I wasn't hiding it, exactly. I just didn't volunteer the information. By the third drink, the air between us had changed. I could feel it in the way he looked at me, like he was seeing me as a woman, not a case. "I should go," I said even as I stayed seated. He nodded. "You should. But I don't want to pretend I don't feel this." I swallowed. "Neither do I." That was the moment. Not the kiss, which came a few seconds later, gentle and tentative. The moment was admitting that whatever this was, it wasn't accidental anymore. The affair didn't explode into passion the way movies show it. It unfolded quietly. Stolen hours. Closed doors. The first time we slept together, it was in a hotel near his office. Neutral again. I remember noticing the patterned carpet and thinking how ordinary it all looked. Afterward, I didn't feel guilty the way I expected. I felt calm. Centered. Like I'd finally done something that belonged to me. Ryan lay beside me, not touching, giving me space. "You don't owe me anything," he said. "I need you to know that." I nodded, grateful. I wanted to believe him. I told myself I wasn't betraying Michael, because our marriage was already over in every way that mattered. This was just making it official. I even thought it might make the divorce easier, emotionally. Like ripping off a bandage instead of peeling it slowly. There were moments of doubt. When Michael cooked dinner and talked about his day. When he mentioned future plans out of habit and then corrected himself, I'd feel a tightness in my chest and wonder if I was being cruel. Then I'd see Ryan again, hear him say my name like it mattered, and the doubt would quiet down. One night, lying with Ryan, I asked him, "Do you think I'm a bad person?" He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "I think you're someone who waited too long to choose herself." That felt like absolution. What I didn't notice then was how carefully he avoided saying anything about us beyond the present. No promises. No future talk. I was too focused on how alive I felt to question why he kept things so contained. I was convinced I had found a secret advantage. Emotional clarity. Leverage even. I thought I was finally ahead of the situation instead of reacting to it. I didn't understand yet that the game I thought I was playing wasn't actually mine to control. The moment everything started to unravel wasn't dramatic. No one walked in on us. No phone buzzing at the wrong time. It was quieter than that, which somehow made it worse. Michael changed. At first, I thought I was imagining it. He became more distant, but not cold. More focused. He stopped asking me casual questions. Stopped filling silence. He watched more than he spoke. When I asked if something was wrong, he'd say no. Just a lot on my mind. I assumed it was the divorce logistics. I told myself that if he suspected anything, he'd confront me. That's how he handled things. Direct, rational. Ryan, on the other hand, grew more careful. He started replying slower. Our meetings became less frequent, always shorter. When I asked him if something was wrong, he said, "We should be mindful. This situation is already complicated." That word again. Complicated? I hated it, but I agreed. I thought he was protecting both of us. The day Michael found out started like any other weekday. He made coffee. I showered. We exchanged polite small talk that felt rehearsed. As I was grabbing my bag, he said, "Can we talk tonight, after work?" "About what?" I asked. "Just us," he said. My stomach dropped. Still, I told myself this could be anything. A practical discussion. A boundary check. I went to work distracted, jumping every time my phone buzzed. That evening, when I came home, Michael was already sitting at the kitchen table. No TV on. No laptop. Just a folder in front of him. That should have been my first real clue. "Sit down," he said, not unkindly. I sat. "I'm gonna ask you something," he continued, hands folded. "And I want a straight answer." I nodded, heart pounding. "Are you sleeping with Ryan Cole?" For a second, I genuinely couldn't breathe. The room felt smaller. Louder. "How?" I started, then stopped. There was no point. Michael watched my face carefully. "So that's a yes." I didn't answer right away. Then I said, "Wes." He closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, he looked tired, not angry. "I wish you'd told me," he said. That hurt more than if he'd yelled. "How do you know?" I asked, my voice barely steady. He tapped the folder. "Because your lawyer, who I trusted, made a mistake. Or maybe he didn't." He didn't elaborate, and I didn't ask. I didn't want the details. I already felt exposed enough. "I didn't plan it," I said quickly. "It just happened." Michael nodded slowly. "Things don't just happen, Emily. People choose them." "I know," I said. "But our marriage was already over." He looked at me then, really looked at me. "That may be how you felt. That doesn't make it true for both of us." I started crying. Not dramatic sobs, just tears I couldn't stop. "I felt invisible," I said. "I told you that. And instead of pushing harder for us," he replied, "you found someone who told you what you wanted to hear." That stung because it wasn't entirely wrong. "What happens now?" I asked. Michael leaned back in his chair. "Now we proceed with the divorce, but things will be adjusted." I knew what that meant. The word clean was gone. I texted Ryan as soon as I was alone. He knows. He didn't reply for over an hour. When he did, it was one sentence. "We need to talk. In person." We met in his office after hours. It felt different walking in there now, like I was stepping into a place that no longer welcomed me. He didn't offer me a seat. He stayed standing, arms crossed. "Did you tell him?" I asked. "No," he said flatly. "I didn't have to?" "What does that mean?" "It means this was always going to come out," he said. "You were careless." That word hit hard. Careless. "You were part of this." "Yes," he said. "And that was a mistake." I stared at him. "So what now?" "Now," he said calmly, "I represent Michael. And I can't continue whatever this was. You used me." I said, the realization finally clicking into place. His expression didn't change. "You used the situation too. Let's not pretend this was innocent. Did any of it mean anything to you?" I asked. He hesitated just long enough to hurt. "That's not relevant." I laughed, sharp and bitter. You told me I didn't owe you anything. And you didn't, he said. But you also didn't have leverage. You misunderstood the dynamic. I felt sick. The divorce process turned ugly fast. Not in court theatrics, but in details. Emails, deadlines, financial evaluations that suddenly felt punitive. My own lawyer did her best, but Ryan was always a step ahead. He knew exactly where to apply pressure. Michael stopped speaking to me unless it was necessary. When he did, he was polite, distant. That somehow hurt more than anger. One evening, during a particularly tense discussion about property, I snapped. Are you doing this to punish me? He looked at me steadily. I'm doing this to protect myself. You made choices. So did I. I wanted to argue, to say he'd driven me away emotionally. But the words felt weak now, like excuses that didn't fit the damage. Ryan disappeared from my life, completely outside of legal correspondence. No lingering looks, no private messages. Just formal language and precise timing. It was like the man I'd known had never existed. That's when it really sank in I hadn't been special. I'd been convenient. By the time the divorce was finalized, I'd lost more than I expected. Financially, yes, but also something harder to name. A sense that I understood people. That I understood myself. I didn't come out of this story empowered or enlightened. I came out quieter. More cautious. Aware that wanting freedom doesn't mean you're prepared for the cost. I still don't know if I would make a different choice if I could go back. That's the part people don't like hearing. But I do know this. I thought breaking my marriage would give me control over my life again. Instead, it taught me how easily control can be an illusion. After everything was signed, there was no big sense of relief. No dramatic exhale. Just a quiet, almost awkward emptiness, like when guests leave after a long party, and you're left with empty glasses and chairs that need to be folded. Michael moved out first. He took his clothes, his tools, his books. He didn't take the couch. He said, "You use it more." That small kindness landed heavier than any insult could have. I watched him load his car, feeling like I should say something meaningful, something that wrapped up 11 years. Instead I said, "Drive safe." He nodded. "You too." That was it. The house felt wrong after that. Too quiet, but not peaceful. I stayed for a few months because financially it made sense, but emotionally it felt like living in a place that had already rejected me. Eventually, I downsized to an apartment closer to the city. Smaller. Neutral. No shared history in the walls. Friends reacted in predictable ways. Some drifted away quietly, unsure how to place me in their mental categories. Others leaned in too hard, telling me I was brave, that I'd done what many women only fantasize about. Those comments made me uncomfortable. I didn't feel brave. I felt exposed. A couple of people asked directly if the rumors were true. I didn't deny them. Lying felt pointless by then. And was it worth it? One friend asked over drinks. I paused longer than she expected. I don't know how to answer that, I said honestly. Work became my safe place for a while. There, my story didn't exist unless I shared it. I could be competent, focused, just another person with deadlines and meetings. Still, some nights I'd come home and sit on the edge of my bed, phone in hand, fighting the urge to text Ryan even though I knew there was no one on the other side anymore. We never spoke again after the divorce was finalized. No closure conversation. No apology. Just silence. In a strange way, that was consistent with who he really was. Precise, contained, unavailable. I replayed moments with him more than I want to admit. Not the physical ones, but the conversations. The way he listened. The way he seemed to understand me so quickly. Over time, I started to see those memories differently. Not as lies, exactly, but as fragments. He'd reflected parts of me back to myself, the parts that felt neglected. I filled in the rest. As for Michael, we don't speak often. Occasionally about mail that gets forwarded to the wrong address, or taxes. Practical things. He's polite. Always polite. He never asks how I'm doing. I never ask if he's seeing someone. Once, months later, I ran into him at a grocery store. We stood by the apples, making small talk like acquaintances. "You look good," he said, and I believed he meant healthy, not happy. "Thanks. You too." There was a pause. Then he said, "I hope you found what you were looking for." I didn't know how to answer that without lying, so I just said, "I'm figuring things out." He nodded. "Yeah, me too." We wished each other well and walked in opposite directions. I cried in my car afterward, not because I wanted him back, but because that chapter was truly closed. I've spent a lot of time asking myself the questions people throw at me. Was I wrong? Was I selfish? Did I sabotage something that could have been fixed? The honest answer is probably yes to all of it, in different ways. I also ask myself harder questions. Why did I need to cross such a clear line to give myself permission to leave? Why did feeling desired matter more to me than being respected? Why did I believe I could control the fallout of a choice like that? I don't think I'm a monster. I don't think I'm a victim either. I think I'm someone who stayed quiet for too long and then made noise in the worst possible way. If there's anything I've learned, it's that justification is powerful. You can make almost anything feel reasonable if you tell yourself the story the right way. I told myself I was already gone. That no one would really get hurt. That I was just accelerating the inevitable. I was wrong about that last part. Acceleration changes impact. I don't regret wanting out of my marriage. That feeling was real and deserved attention. I regret how I handled it. I regret confusing being seen with being valued. And I regret thinking that sleeping with someone powerful would somehow give me power too. Sometimes I imagine posting this on a forum, reading the comments roll in. I know exactly what people would say. Some would call me trash. Some would say Michael dodged a bullet. Others would say Ryan was the real villain. A few would quietly admit they've thought about doing something similar. All of them would be partly right. Life now is quieter. Simpler. Not better or worse in any clear way. Just different. I'm more careful with my choices. More honest with myself about my motives. I don't tell this story to excuse what I did, but I also don't tell it to punish myself forever. I wanted freedom. I got it. Just not in the form I imagined, and not without leaving damage behind me. If you're reading this and thinking about making a drastic choice to feel alive again, all I can say is this: don't confuse escape with resolution. They feel similar at first, but they lead to very different places. I'm still walking through the place my choices brought me. And I'm finally learning to do it, without pretending I didn't choose the path.